Welcome you back to the Patrick Netherton Show right here on 1130 The Tiger, 103.3 FM, and of course over on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Netherton Show. Well, after the show that we saw put on by Cailin Clark and LSU and the ratings that we saw that came out last night about the record-setting numbers that game did, I thought, hey, who better to talk to than our good friend Aiden Jacobi from Go Iowa Awesome. I'm sorry, I'm getting Adam Jacobi. I'm sorry, that's apparently how you pronounce it. Adam Jacobi from Go Iowa Awesome. Our good buddy Adam, by the way, you're a lovely human being for spending a little time with us, especially since I know you're trying to figure out how to get to Cleveland from Albany, which I'm pretty sure that no one's ever tried to book that itinerary before. How the hell are you, my friend?
I'm quite all right, Peter Netherlands. It's great to be on your show. It's great to hear an old friend, and I'm also recovering from last night because it was the most intense basketball game I've ever personally witnessed.
Well, here's what's crazy, right? It's a neutral site. But it didn't feel like a neutral site. It felt like a home game for either one of those teams. Like, that's the level of intensity that it seemed like. And I'm just watching it from my living room. But it felt like the intensity of a home game for one of these teams.
Yeah, it did. And I talked with somebody who noticed that in the Iowa-Colorado game in Sweet 16, it was primarily black and gold for Iowa too, but it was not quite as loud. And his thought was some of these folks were Cailin Clark fans. They were locals who were like, well, I'll buy a jersey, I'll show up, I'll watch the show just once. But they were there to sort of take in the spectacle more than be such an active participant that Iowa fans had become. That was not the case last night. The Iowa fans were in full throat. The LSU fans were as loud as they always are. You know that quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like a heavyweight prize fight. And the fact that it was only an Elite Eight game, the seedings are what they are, and I don't think anybody was seeded all that unfairly. But the fact that this game happened prior to the Final Four, if I'm Cleveland, I'm a little bit upset about that.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is, though.
Here's what's funny, though, Adam. We saw the record-breaking numbers, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I'm not 100% sure that a UConn Iowa is going to outdraw an LSU Iowa simply because of the teams that are involved. Obviously, UConn is the bluest of blue bloods when it comes to college basketball, on the women's side especially. But there just seems to be a certain something with the LSU team and Angel Reese and that whole crew, Kim Mulkey, of course, and then Cailin Clark in Iowa. I mean, I don't know that the numbers will be what they'll be for a UConn versus Iowa, but I will be a little surprised if it's a lot higher or even just a little bit higher than what we saw with LSU Iowa. There felt like there was something there that maybe wouldn't be present in another game.
Yeah, and the fact that last night's game came on a Monday night, everybody's at home watching TV on a Monday night. Iowa-UConn will be late Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's the sort of game that you might want to stay home for. But are you really going to blame anybody if they've got something better to do at 9 or 10 p.m. on a Friday night? So that's going to play a little bit of a part in it. The Iowa-UConn history is not as sorted,
and as recent
especially in the last 12 months. Like there has not been, and Gino Ariema, to his credit, is running screaming from any idea of any drama between him and the Iowa program, because he does not want to get on Caitlin's bad side. I will say this about the Iowa players: very few of them took any bait in terms of we were looking for this game, we wanted revenge or this or that. They all stuck to their thing, like, no, we're focused on the title, we're focused on playing our game and this and that. But you knew, and a few of the players did admit, they're like, yeah, we've been waiting for this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the team that denied them a title. And look, LSU is brash and cocky, and they talk. And Cailin Clark is
Mm-hmm.
brash and cocky, and she talks, but I think
Mm-hmm.
the main differentiating factor between the two teams is Kim Mulkey and Lisa Bluder, right? Bluder doesn't really say
Oh
anything
yeah.
controversial. She's not wearing the flashy outfits. Although Mulkey just looked like she had won the Masters, like she was not in a flashy outfit at all, comparatively speaking to last year's run. But I think that's the differentiating factor. The stars are trash talkers; they like to get after it. The supporting cast are both really good. To me, it's Mulkey as such an outspoken, kind of theatrical person, as opposed to Lisa Bluder, who is just I mean, if you want to talk about milk and cookies versus dirty debutantes, which is ridiculous, but if you want to talk good and evil, Bluter and Mulkey are kind of the show for me. I hate to use those sort of reductive terms, but like that's to me the difference in these two teams is way more people have an opinion about Kim Mulkey than do about Lisa Bluter.
Yeah, their personalities are pretty much polar opposites, and we don't really necessarily have to frame it in terms of good and evil
Sure,
because
exactly.
it worked great for Mulkey last year, but Mulkey is she's a very pugnacious individual, and it has worked obviously gangbusters for her, and she's got the hardware to prove it. And Bluter is again just on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, very focused on player retention, team chemistry, and to some extent, I think that played it was one factor in how Iowa won that game because watching that game, especially in person, Iowa was making plays that a team full of players who have been around each other for 4+ years makes. And LSU, who was more physically talented by far, and Angel Reese, prior to her ankle injury,
Mm-hmm.
was doing whatever she wanted on the interior, whatever she wanted, and probably would have made that game closer in the second half if she were at 100%. They never took the bait, and they never said that it was a contributing factor, either Mulkey nor Reese nor anyone on Iowa side. They never copped to that affecting her, but come on, you could just see it.
Yep.
And the fact that Reese shot 1 for 10 in the second half, even with 6 offensive rebounds, like she was feeling well enough to get the 6 offensive rebounds, but just going 1 for 10 against Iowa's backup center mostly.
Yeah, and
Really, and you could see her walking up and down the court when she was able to. Like she
mm-hmm.
could run if it were transition, but if she didn't have to run, she wasn't running. And you could tell that Iowa's pace, and the coaches even said after the game that they were going to run LSU off the floor. And with the Tigers running let's call it a 6.5 player rotation,
Right.
Iowa saw exactly what they wanted to do, and they executed it.
Well, it's funny because neither team was particularly deep last night. I mean, Iowa ran basically 6.5 players as well. The difference, and here's what's funny going into it, LSU's actually a faster paced team than Iowa, which is insane to consider when you look at what they do. The difference is once Angel Reese got injured, she became so much less effective. And this is what I said going in. I thought the main factor would be. I said if LSU got a metric ton of offensive rebounds, they had to go over their offensive rebounding average, which I believe was 16 or 17 going in. They had to have more offensive rebounds than that, but most importantly, they had to do something with them. They had 23 offensive rebounds, but only 14 points, second chance points, and that was not going to do it. They also didn't have a huge advantage in points in the paint, and if they were going to win that game, they had to have huge advantages in points on the paint and second chance points, and they were negated. How many times, Adam, did we see 3 offensive rebounds in a row for LSU that ended in no basket?
Oh yeah, and that was happening all game long. I mean,
Yeah.
even in the first half, when LSU had only 7 offensive rebounds, that still only resulted in 4 second half points, or excuse me, 4 second chance points. So it's not as if you can draw a line of delineation on Reese's ankle at that point for that. It was just a matter of getting the ball in the basket when you've got it within 15 feet, or excuse me, within 5 feet.
Right.
And in the early going, they were doing that well, and whether it was often offensive rebound or not, but Angel Reese had 3 offensive rebounds in I think the first 5 or 6 minutes,
Yeah, and by the way,
and
Morrow
it was
was Morrow
clear.
was missing her share of offensive rebound putbacks too. It's not like anyone had the monopoly on that.
Yeah, and some of it was some folks don't like the L word when it comes to basketball, but it was on LSU's side last year, and that's luck. Luck to me does not invalidate a win, but it does play a part in the outcome of a lot of wins. Iowa got a little bit lucky with the fact that LSU was not more efficient converting in the interior.
Yeah, when
Just
your
like LSU
bigs,
got lucky.
yeah,
Yeah,
when your bigs are
yeah,
14 of 39 from the field, like you're not going to win a lot of games when your two big post players, who by the way went for 31 and 34 points rebounds, but they go 14 of 39 from the field. You're just not. That's not effective. That is not efficient. That is not going to win you a lot of games.
No, and they were also sort of playing catch up with the fact that the backcourt was really, really struggling. And some of that might be Mulkey's game plan. Some of it might just be, again, bad shooting luck that, sort of on the opposite side of the spectrum of what LSU did in the championship game last year. And some of it's just the fact that Cailin Clark made Hailey Van Lith's life just
Well,
a nightmare
that's where
last
we're
night.
headed next. We're talking to Adam Jacobi, our good friend from Go Iowa Awesome, who's been on the transformative, transcendent ride that is Cailin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes for the last couple of years. All right, so Hailey Van Lith, I don't know if she got cooked more by Cailin Clark or the internet over the last 24 hours. And I keep coming back to this. Number one, I'm not making excuses for Hailey Van Lith. She wouldn't want me to make excuses for her. Number one, she was sick. She was taking IVs the night before the game, the day of the game, all of that. All right. That notwithstanding, I believe that the game plan for Mulkey was to try to make Cailin Clark take tough shots, but to make sure that the teammates didn't get involved. I think that's why they never hedged or doubled off of any pick and roll. You didn't see switching going on. It was, look, Hailey Van Lith, last year Poa, and then eventually Flau'jae Johnson, try to make her make tough shots, which she did all night long. There were a lot of shots that she took that were contested, but they were 4 or 5 feet behind the arc, right? I mean, that's what Cailin Clark does. But I think the game plan was stop everybody else. The problem is they didn't. And every time Clark put a ball on someone's hands, it was going in. Threes were going in. Layups were going in. She threw a 55-foot fast break pass to a center to lay it up and in. That's the problem is they tried to stop one thing, and they ended up stopping nothing.
Yeah, and Van Lith, like you said, she was not 100%. She was visibly not 100%. And the fact that she played 30 minutes was certainly brave of her. But Cailin was able to make one dribble, make one move, make one spin, and just like one lateral move was all it took to have Hailey chasing her for basically the rest of the play. And to somebody with the court vision of Cailin Clark, which is unlike any I've ever seen, male, female, whatever level, to somebody with that level of vision, that's basically like playing 5-on-4. And there aren't a whole lot of better options, but something that really surprised me about how that game shook out was the fact that last year Poa played 15 minutes, and she got 2 fouls in the first quarter. We can't discount that. The second one was a little bit iffy.
Sure.
But they did call it. And then what surprised me though was that at the very least Poa could keep Cailin in front of her. She could slow down what Clark was wanting to do, and Iowa was at the very least working for its points. And
well, and I'll be honest with you, I thought that Hailey Van Lith made her work a bit. The problem is, you and I had this discussion, and sorry to cut you off. You and I had this discussion online. Who's stopping her? who has stopped her? How many games in a row now has she had 20 plus points? Like, who is gonna make that like? And you brought up, Indiana slowed her down, and Ohio State made it tough on her, and J.J. Quinterly from West Virginia was good, and she had nearly a triple double against Indiana, and she had 35 against J.J. Quinterly in West Virginia, and she had 45 against Ohio State. Like, I feel bad for Haley Van Lith because she's doing the same thing that every other defender trying to guard Cailin Clark has done.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you can sort of look at, especially as an LSU fan, is the 2023 game where you're picking Clark up at half court, you're living inside her jersey, you're trying to draw offensive fouls. You saw Poa try that at least once, and the referees didn't bite on that one last night.
Yeah.
And I think she should have tried it some more. And I also think at a minimum, Mulkey should have used up the fouls that Poa had to give, because she's a bigger, stronger defender. She's better moving laterally. Even if Van Lith got back in front of Clark, the play was like the chess pieces were already moving. And Bree Lewerke, who was photographing the game and just a tremendous photographer, tremendous person, she put out a thread of Caitlin's 9 3-pointers, and you could see that there was usually hand up, and the ball was usually about 3 or 4 feet above that hand.
Right.
By the time that picture was shot. So, I mean, yeah, somebody got there in time to, be in the picture for, the holding the follow through. Like, Van Lith was close enough to shrug so the cameras could see it. But in terms of
she's also 5'7".
Right. And that, too, really does not play well against Cailin Clark, who is a legit 6'0".
Yeah. I mean, look, if Haley Van Lith can be in Cailin Clark's hip pocket, and in the end, if Cailin Clark wants to elevate and take a shot, she's going to get her shot off. Last year, Poe was 5'11". Here's the real problem for LSU, and we're going to talk about UConn and Iowa here in just a second, but the real problem for LSU is they do not have another guard. Last year, Poa is it, and they have one guard and they have one big sub. That's all they got. And so if any of the guard positions, if it's Van Lith or Flau'jae Johnson or Michaela Williams, if they need a break, it's last year Poa. If either of the bigs want a break, it's Del Rosario. And that's it. And that's all you got. And Del Rosario played like 2.5 minutes last night, so she was a non-factor. And I think, honestly, that's why Mulkey was scared to try to say, hey, Poa, go get her. Because unlike last year's LSU team, which had a ton of guard depth and ability to run bodies at her, they did not have that. And if you give Cailin Clark a tired defender, you're toast, period.
Oh, yeah. At the very least, like last year in the championship game, LSU had 29 bench minutes just in its backcourt between Poa and Carson. And like you said, it was just Poa for the 15 minutes in this game and nobody else. And yeah, like that, I think also that lack of trust for whatever else is in that backcourt probably explains why Flau'jae didn't switch on to Clark until the game was, I don't want to say out of reach because it wasn't, but
desperation time.
Yeah. And that's the point where you don't have to, you're like, all right, I'm not going to be worrying about Flau'jae fouling out or not. Like,
right. I mean, they had to have her
fourth
points.
Quarter, just get after it.
So they couldn't afford to get her in foul trouble. Like they had to.
Couldn't afford to get her in foul trouble and couldn't afford her to be spending a ton of energy on the defensive end, just chasing around Clark. And Clark and the Iowa game plan was wear them out on the on the perimeter, find a way to get the ball inside on a cutter or this or that, use your switches. And it was executed perfectly. And in terms of the pace, there was one more thing that I noticed. Iowa did not call a timeout until the last minute of the game when they were up by 12. Mm-hmm. They didn't give LSU one free break while the game was still in doubt.
Yeah.
And so I asked Bluter about that after the game, and she said, well, there was a point in the second quarter where I'm thinking about it. But they also knew that, forcing LSU to expend the energy over and over and over And like, yeah, Iowa did only use about 10 or 12 more bench minutes, but Iowa also has a bench that it trusts to go 10 deep and really 2 deep at any of the positions.
Yeah.
So they're just because they didn't use all that gas in the tank didn't mean that it wasn't there.
All right.
So
Is
yeah,
there? Sorry, we're gonna jump ahead for a second.
yeah,
Is there something to this? And I didn't know a lot of Cailin Clark's background. It's not like I've studied her. I mean, obviously we've all seen what she's done on the floor, you know. And then Wright
yeah.
Thompson's piece comes out, and it was, as a Wright Thompson piece is, just magnificent. And I learned a lot of things. And one of the things I learned, and I think I kind of knew this from some other stuff, but I maybe just didn't file it away, was the whole Cailin Clark wanted to go to UConn. And Gino never called, and he never came by, and he never showed all of that stuff. Um, is there some legitimacy to this being a thing that lights a fire that, you know, everyone talked about this Iowa LSU game being a revenge game for Iowa. Is Iowa UConn a revenge game for Cailin Clark because she didn't get recruited by UConn?
If there's any lingering animosity there, I don't think it survives all this time. I mean, yeah, a competitor like Clark will relish the opportunity to close out her career more or less by getting that win over Gino. Yeah, don't get me wrong, but in terms of a like a motivating factor, like Patrick, it's the Final Four of
No,
Caitlin
not
Clark's
not that
senior
she
season.
needs a
Yeah,
motivation for this. I'm just saying, is there a
yeah.
layer of that there that's still there after, you know, 3-4 years now from when this all happened? Is there something still there, you think?
Well, she's never said anything publicly to that, you know, aside from the comments to Wright Thompson. But by and large, I think that there's a pretty deep mutual respect between Caitlin, between Paige, between Gino, between Lisa. Like all four of those, there's heavy respect interchanging between all of them. So I don't expect any hint of animosity, any hint of yeah, take that, this or that, and even if UConn wins, I don't think that that's going to burn Caitlin more than usual because ultimately she is as happy as she could be at Iowa. And one other thing that was mentioned in that Wright Thompson piece about her recruitment was if she was going to go anywhere else, it was going to be Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from a Catholic school, especially a very affluent Catholic school in central Iowa, you know, Notre Dame was always the place to go. And Clark had committed there briefly, but never announced it and really came to her senses in terms of like, what do I really want? Like, is this a perfect fit for me? So that is a bigger part of her story than just the fact that Gino took a look at Paige Buchers and said that Caitlin was going to be a little bit redundant. You know?
I'm kind of curious. You know, a lot is made of the on court histrionics for Clark, the complaining to the officials. I thought she was really on good behavior last night. I don't know if that was something that she set out to do, or maybe made it a point to say, hey, this is going to be a huge audience. I need to kind of be on my best behavior. I think I remember complaining once about a traveling call, and maybe one other time I thought she was pretty good. Is that something that is of a concern of anyone around there? That on the on-court stuff and the complaining to the officials and the seeming frustration when her teammates maybe don't make a play that she thinks they should make. Is that anything that's a story outside, or I guess more inside of Iowa than it is outside to the rest of us?
Well, the short answer is no. The longer answer is no.
Very good. Very good. Yes, that's a longer answer. Congratulations.
Yeah. But when it's directed at teammates, that has been the sharp edge that the coaching staff has been trying to smooth down, and they've done a lot of good work on that front. But you know, at the same time, there was the fact that Addison O'Grady had been referred to as a quote little bit of a punching bag for Clark, and you could see that in their on-court chemistry both last year and this year. So that it's not as if that is a solved problem, and it's really not the if there is anything that causes consternation, it's not the complaining to the officials. It's not the waving your hand in Van Lith's face last year. Didn't see any of that this year, thank goodness, because honestly, I think it's more of a distraction. And she didn't have a whole lot to complain about. I will say this though, she did have I shouldn't say quite a few. She did have a few non-calls where, she would glare at the referee. She would let them know that she didn't like that call. But between the fact that Iowa spent most of the most of the second half leading, and usually by 7+ points, and the fact that Cailin was having another stellar game, she didn't have a whole lot to complain about to begin with.
Why would you?
So if LSU's leading for most of the second half, I think you probably would have seen a little bit more out of her, because she wears her frustrations on whatever counts as a sleeve on a basketball uniform. But ultimately, it has very rarely affected her production on the court. And ultimately, her teammates just, for the most part, and publicly, her teammates gush about her and her coaches gush about her, and they compliment her on what a good and inclusive teammate she is.
Well, she seems like a delight off the floor. That's the thing. Like you hear the story, and again, I go back to the Wright Thompson piece. They're having dinner together and they're enjoying time in their rooms. Like she sounds like an absolute delight. It's just when she's one of those ultra competitors when she steps between the lines. And there are a lot of people that I've seen in my lifetime, you've seen in your lifetime, that you see them off the floor and they couldn't be sweeter, and you see them on the floor and they just as soon rip your head off and stomp on your neck. Like that's who these people are, and she seems like one of those people, which doesn't bother me. I don't like the histrionics necessarily, but she never seems to direct it at an opponent, which I appreciate. You want to get mad at the refs, fine. You want to get mad at your own teammates, fine. I'm a big proponent of not going after an opponent. Don't go and show up an opponent. Don't taunt an opponent. That's why I was very critical of Angel Reese last year after the game was getting final, and she's doing the "you can't see me" in her face and pointing at the ring at her. I don't like that. Celebrate with your team. If you want to play the heel to an opposing crowd that you're in their venue and you're beating them and you want to play to the crowd, fine. But don't do it at someone. That's my line of delineation.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and by and large, that's the way that Clark operates too, especially in terms of like being in an opponent's face. And some of it is just because I think that they have learned the hard way in Iowa City that usually that juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yeah, all right.
That it causes more problems.
Absolutely. All right, final thing for you, Adam. Thank you for giving us a bunch of time. We really do appreciate it, brother. How do you go about making sure that you're appreciating the greatness that you're seeing? I have, I've seen some amazing players that have come through Northwestern State. I've seen some amazing teams that have come through Northwestern State. We won't talk about 2006. I've seen some just, really incredible teams, incredible players, incredible moments. And I said to people in 2006, I may never have a better call in a situation than the 14 seed beating the 3 seed. I won't mention who the 3 seed was. And I may never see another point guard as good as Jalen West, who was, was there back in the early 2010s. How do you make sure that while you're on this journey, you're also appreciating the greatness that is 10, 15 feet in front of you?
Well, a big part of that is just the privilege, really, of doing this for a job and writing about and getting my thoughts on paper, and the privilege of being able to talk to not only Cailin but talk to her teammates who are tremendous people, and talk to her coaches too. And some of it's interviews, some of it's for quotes, but at the same time, any time that I get to talk to people that are so clearly great at what they do, that I should be coming away from those conversations / interviews having learned something. And as long as I get to carry that forward, with myself, then it's easier to appreciate that. And I'll also throw this in. Jan Jensen, who's the assistant head coach for Iowa, is the first basketball player that I remember reading about in the local paper when I was growing up. And so, she's always held this sort of almost totemic presence in
Sure.
my basketball appreciation. And so the fact that I get to like talk to her, and she is an absolutely tremendous interview. And even though her answers last even longer than I don't know mine do every time I'm on your show,
Mm.
uh, but you know that, but it turns into a conversation, turns into a learning experience, and then ultimately the records are what they are. The stages are as big as they are. At some point the greatness is almost impossible to miss. And so yeah, just taking some time to appreciate that, to step back and say, man, I am on a ride like very few beat writers have ever been on in women's college basketball. Ever. Like it is a little hard, and maybe it's going to take a few years away from um, these brightest lights to say, yeah, that was singular and unique. But for the most part, as long as you like the sport and you like the people that you're writing about, it's really, really easy to see the greatness.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think you know that too from Northwestern State.
sure. I mean, look, like I said, I've been around singular, spectacular players, teams, coaches, that sort of thing, and I try to make sure that I'm appreciating the moments as they're happening, and that's why I appreciate every time I get to have Adam Jacobi on my little radio show. I know.
Absolutely sticks the landing.
I
Oh my
mean,
goodness.
it's almost like I've done this for two plus decades now. Um, Unfortunately for us, Adam, neither one of us are getting more handsome as we age, but at least we are
Disagree.
still hilarious and intelligent, and we've got that going for us, which is nice. My friend, enjoy. I'm assuming you're going to Cleveland.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Flying out tomorrow morning.
Enjoy the eclipse in Cleveland. That ought to be.
Are they going to be able to see it there too?
Yeah,
Like
I think it's.
I know that there were
I think
signs in
it's.
Albany here.
Yeah, it's a. I think I'm not sure if you're on the complete totality, but you're in the like 80%. I think. There in
Oh, that's
Cleveland.
going to be
So
awesome.
yeah, so you'll get a solar eclipse, and you'll get to see three of the best teams in the country, and NC State for some reason. I kid. I don't know any NC. Actually, our AD at Northwestern State is an NC State guy, so he'll appreciate that. But hey, they got the best player in the men's tournament, so we'll go with that. Speaking of big boys that can get it done, DJ Burns
DJ.
and NC State. Yeah, love him to death. Brother, you're the best. Enjoy the ride. Look, I hope Iowa wins the national championship. It would be an amazing thing to see and to see her rewarded. And look, I hope that hope they just snip a little piece of the net off for you and give it to you, my friend.
Well, I don't think they'll do that. But, brother, if they win the national championship, you're going to be the first show I go on. And that's an
Oh,
Adam Jacobi guarantee.
that's worth its weight in lead. My friend, you're the best. Be good, and look forward to catching up with you soon, man.
Love you, brother. Take
All
care.
right. It's Adam Jacobi from Go Iowa Awesome.